Imagine a Genesis song that plays like a full philosophical novel. Fate, rebellion, prophecy, and a twist that really changes everything. Well, that's what Tony Banks slipped into 9 minutes on Wind and Wuthering. Let's talk about one epic so many fans still overlook. Tony Banks once said that the story of One for the Vine just arrived in his head, really almost fully formed. But he did credit the inspiration to Michael Moorcock's science fiction novel Phoenix in Obsidian. And really, when Tony Banks's imagination hands you a concept, you take it, because the man's inner world is basically a fantasy trilogy waiting to happen. I'm playing the track next. You can listen to the full version unedited on my Patreon, where membership is currently free. What a beautiful track that is. One for the Vine from Wind and Wuthering by Genesis. So looking a little bit more closely at this, our story really begins in a future society ruled by a prophet, a kind of followers obey absolute commands, and somewhere inside this bleak world is a solitary soldier who's been drafted into war he never really believed in. He's not a noble hero. He's not chosen. He's just trying to survive. Now, the soldier is ordered to fight and die for a higher cause, but something inside him snapped. He abandoned the battlefield, a death sentence, and flees into the wilderness. That single act of rebellion was the spark that would alter the fate of an entire civilization. Tony Banks used the music to mimic the soldier's escape. The piano line becomes the restless, almost claustrophobic, as if each note is a 4-step deeper into the unknown. For weeks, he wandered through mountains and frozen plains, starving, delirious, clinging to the faint hope that freedom existed somewhere beyond the reach of this evil prophet. Then something strange happened. The soldier stumbled upon a remote, peaceful community. It's a society untouched by the prophet's tyranny. They've been waiting for someone. In fact, they believe he is the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. They see him as a divine messenger, and as our protagonist, who's exhausted, traumatized, and really half dead, does what any one of us might do in that moment. He lets them believe it, not maliciously, just because he no longer knows who he is. So this is where the music begins to shift. Bright soaring chords symbolizing hope. Genesis fans know exactly the moment I'm talking about here. The soldier becomes a spiritual leader, but he never really claims to be a prophet. He simply wants peace, and yet the more guidance he offers, the more his people revere him. Over time, they begin to shape a whole religion around him. Despite his best efforts, he does try to stop it, but he tells them he's no saviour. But faith, once ignited, is almost impossible to contain. And then comes the twist, the one that gives the song its legendary spin. A new society he's helped guide eventually faces a crisis. It's exactly the same kind of crisis that created the original Prophet King. And they interpret his teachings as a call to arms. They march into battle, shouting his name, his words, his ideals. Twisted into something he never really intended. Now, our soldier here watches in horror as history begins repeating itself in front of his very eyes. And now we've reached the emotional core of the track, the no, no, no moment where really every Genesis fan knows. Here, the soldier suddenly understands. The prophet he fled from, the tyrant whose rule he despised, the leader whose commands shaped his entire life, was him. His escape into the wilderness didn't break destiny, it just fulfilled it. Now, in a single moment, he realized that he has lived through a closed loop, a cycle of prophecy that really trapped him across generations. His flight from authoritarianism created a new authoritarianism. This is Tony Banks doing full Greek tragedy wrapped in progressive rock. Now, this is where my brain wants to lean in and say, do you know, this is a story about how people create their own myths and how those myths come to rule them. The soldier believed he was escaping fate. He believed he was making a choice. But the moment others believed in him, the prophecy self-replicated. What if destiny isn't imposed by the gods, but by the stories people tell about you? That's the real philosophical punch of One for the Vine. You can run from power, but power has a tendency to follow you. And sometimes running from the past causes it to run straight into the future. And when Wind and Wuthering came out in 1976, One for the Vine wasn't the single, it wasn't marketed. It wasn't even part of the band's usual live highlights once Hackett had departed. Banks compared the song to his earlier composition, The Lamia, but felt One for the Vine was much better because his lyrics fit the music much better this time around. But for fans who dig into the deeper Genesis catalogue, this track is a narrative treasure. It's a myth. It's a parable. It's a time loop. It's a warning about leadership, about destiny and blind belief. And it's also a proof of what Genesis did better than almost anyone. They told stories that weren't just fantastical, they were human. So the next time you listen to One for the Vine, think of the soldier walking into exile, desperately trying to break a cycle that perhaps cannot be broken. And ask yourself this: if people believed you were a prophet, could you convince them otherwise? Thanks for watching, friends. If you've enjoyed this deep dive, let me know which Genesis narrative you'd want me to have a look at next. Drop your pick in the comments if you will. If your suggestion gets enough support, it may well be featured in an upcoming video. You just never know. Thanks for watching this video, and until next time, keep listening, keep exploring, and remember, in the world of prog, the journey never really ends. I'll see you next time. theocratic dictator who's our protagonists.
Whose faith had died, fled back up the mountainside. Footfall made him stay from your heart, prepared for him. This is he, God's chosen.